Hey, Sydney.
Hey, Samuel.
I'm thinking about planning a trip to New York. How about the two of us go to the Rainbow Room?
No. You can't buy Coke there, so.
I'm glad you're here on this Sunday. I'm going to get right into the message. I'm going to tell it like it is, as they say. Oh, I heard a hallelujah. Do you think I don't know what the hell is going on? And a lot of strange places. Where in the hell have you been? Hellfire! 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 All right. Okay, there's something else, too.
Hello and welcome to the Satire Fire podcast, your premier destination to learn about Bobos, yuppies, PMCs, and more. I am your host, Samuel.
And I'm Sydney.
And this is part 2 of our series on American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis. If you missed last week's episode, it was a plot synopsis for American Psycho to kind of get us all caught up on what the book is about, what happens in the book, what's going on, so that this week, in today's episode, we can talk about the historical and cultural context surrounding the book, get a better idea of where Bret Easton Ellis's head was when he was writing it, what was going on in the world. And then the plan will be that next week in part 3, we're going to take the plot and the context and use those to kind of analyze the book and say, what do we think about it? What are the themes? What are the messages? Is it good? Is it effective? Did it weird us the hell out? Who's to say? Maybe, possibly. So, if you missed last week's episode, like I said, if you haven't read the book, you can go back and listen to that, get caught up, and then jump back here, because we've got a lot of history to cover that is going to be relatively interesting. I learned quite a lot I learned quite a lot about Bret Easton Ellis. I feel like it's a relative interest because some of it is not necessarily very fun stuff to learn about. So whether or not it's interesting is kind of a matter of perspective, probably.
I saw this TikTok I was, perusing book talk, as I do as the social media content creator for the Satire Fire.
The brand manager.
As the brand manager. And I saw this TikTok about American Psycho, the book. And so the person was like, I love American Psycho because not only was the movie directed by a woman, but the book was also written by a woman. And I was like,
Not to my knowledge, but
interesting.
Close enough. But
Like, just blatant misinformation.
we love spreading misinformation on the Satire Fire. But before we get into our potential misinformation, Sydney, have you been doing or reading or watching anything recently that you want to talk about?
I'm in a real reading slump recently, which is... It's been tough. Like, I have several books I want to start reading, and I just haven't been motivated to start any of them. So, no, I forgot how to read. But
I love becoming unliterate, like deliterating myself.
I've been deliterating recently, and no, what have I done? Let me think. I didn't prep anything for this. I went to a concert. Yeah, I went to a Conan Gray concert, which was fun. Conan Gray just released an album in this year, and it is called Wishbone, and he started touring. I don't know when he started touring for it, but it's called the Wishbone Pajama Show, And so you're encouraged to wear your pajamas or like a pajama inspired outfit, because he's in like kind of fancy pajamas at one point, and that like bedazzled pajamas at one point in the show. Anyway, so yeah, I wore pajamas to a concert, and that was really fun. I've never done that before. I am a Conan Gray fan, but I'm not like a huge stan. I haven't been like listening for a really long time or anything. I'm not like, I don't know, I haven't been there since the beginning or anything like that. My cat's throwing his toy around. So because of my friend who had like connections to this specific show, we ended up getting like pretty good seat. Well, we were in the pit. Like we were just right by the stage, and I've never in my life been in the pit in a concert. Like I've been to a general admission show where it was just kind of standing room. If you got there earlier, then you could be close. But I've never, if there was an option, you might just have to like be hearing him play with this thing with a bell on it in the background, because it's oh my gosh. Hi everyone, this is Griff, if you hear him playing with his toy. Anyways, so yeah, I've never been in the pit. Like if there's an option to purchase pit seats, but you can also purchase cheaper tickets, I always just get cheaper further back seats. So I'd never done this anyways, but because my friend had connections, we were there, and I kind of feel like I didn't deserve to be there, because like I'm not like a super fan or anything, and I feel like that's what the pit is for, you know, that or like influencers who are like getting super good videos for the, I don't know. And so that was cool. Like it was a really good show though, and it was fun to wear my pajamas to a concert. So
sexuality is a spectrum, and I think that this is the straight side of my spectrum rearing its ugly head. Who the fuck is Conan Gray?
He's a gay man. So Conan Gray, for everyone who's not aware, you probably know him because he had a song in 2020 that went viral called Heather. It's like, I wish I were Heather. I watched your eyes as she walks by. No? Okay. That song went viral, and basically it's about him being with this straight man who he's like has a crush on, and that man, the straight man, likes a girl named Heather, and so he's like, I wish I were Heather. So that song went viral back in 2020, and I feel like a lot of people know that one.
Okay.
But he's just a little gay boy who makes pop music.
Is he like is he the there was another queer coded boy making pop music recently. Is he like the replacement for Benson Boone?
Benson Boone is like Mormon, isn't he?
I don't know. So audience, if you don't know, I run in very different musical circles than Conan Gray and Benson Boone.
Benson Boone, you cannot put Conan Gray and Benson Boone in the same musical circle. No, Conan Gray's been here. He's been here for longer than Benson. Whatever. Benson Boone. The other day I was talking to my friend about Benson Boone. I was like, does his fan base call themselves the Booners? But no, he's just like, it's pop music, but I would say it's more kind of like it's like ballad inspired. A lot of it is.
Okay.
My one song I really like is Memories, which is from his album Super Ache. He played that one. And like popular songs, he's got Wish You Were Sober, he's got Maniac, Tell All Your Friends That I'm Crazy and Drive You Mad, That I'm Just a Stalker, a Watcher, Psychopath. It's Pat Bateman. And so that one's popular. I don't know. I don't really know how to help you.
I don't think that you can help me. I think that it's just a blind spot for me. I saw that you post about him and a concert on Instagram, and I was like, you could have made all of this up. This could be somebody that you're just friends with, and it would not. would not change my understanding of the situation.
It's funny. I did feel like the fan base at this concert was interestingly like young. Like it felt like it was a lot of like high schoolers or something, or maybe like early college. I don't know. Like there was no line at any of the bars for drinks, and I was like, okay, let's, yeah. No, it was fun.
That
like I
tracks.
said, it was kind of like it was free to me. The tickets weren't fully free, but it like was I just was like, yeah, I'll go. So
Fair enough. I would also go if it was free.
Anyways, now that I've sang 3 different Conan Gray songs, I think.
To zero reception. Just audience, if you could see the Discord call, it was just Sydney singing and me with a blank face. Like there was nothing going on. I was disassociating during that.
I cannot believe you compared him to Benson Boone. Like the Conan Gray fans are gonna like get you canceled for that.
Damn. I'll be on the lookout for an angry mob of 16-year-old girls.
Yeah. And like, oh no, I don't know if I can say that. Never mind. I was gonna say, wait, you promise you won't put this in if I say it?
Sure, unless it's really funny.
I was gonna be like, and like the twink boys, but like
Yeah, that's not your word, Sid.
I can't say that. But like you can only say that like if you have a friend who like self-identifies and then he's like, yeah.
Yeah, you gotta get the twink pass.
I don't have it. Anyways.
Okay. I've not been to any high school twink concerts recently, but I have been reading.
I'm so glad you're not deliterating.
No, I'm actively trying to reliterate. I have decided that deliterating is so 2025, and so I'm getting ahead of the trend for reliterating in 2026.
Yeah.
But a book that I read recently that was totally outside of my typical genre that I read in, and I found pretty interesting, was the book called Stormfront by Jim Butcher. It is a neo-noir kind of like private eye story set in Chicago. It's following all the same tropes that you would expect from that, of like going out in a black duster in the rain, and there's all these pretty women that he has to deal with and stuff, but it has the added like layer of complexity of it takes place in a world in which magic is real. It's just not widely known about or talked about or discussed, and the main character is a practicing wizard. He like has instead of being a private eye, his business is based on him being a wizard for hire. And it's following him as he goes through the process of using his abilities to help the police solve a murder and help different people in different ways using his powers. And it's pretty interesting. I think that I had an issue with it because it suffers for like a metatextual reason of you as the audience know things before the main character does, simply because like, okay, you're telling me about this murder investigation, and you're also telling me about this strange woman that came in asking you to help her investigate the disappearance of her husband. And he, the main character, doesn't recognize until later in the story that those two things are connected to one another, that the missing husband is involved in the murder investigation. But because you're reading the story and you have an understanding, well, they've got to be related. Like, you wouldn't be talking about them both if they weren't related. And so that like takes some of the suspense and some of the payoff out of it whenever that's finally revealed. And then also, I think I've talked a couple of times on this podcast about reading books that were very sexually explicit and giving like a heads up of, hey, if you're not really interested in reading descriptions of people having sex, don't read this book. This one is incredibly horny, but nobody has sex. And it's like, I don't know, it just kind of feels like if you're gonna drive your car all the way to the store, you might as well go in and buy something. Like he spends the whole book describing all the flirtatious interactions that he's having with these beautiful women. And then finally you get to the end of the book and there's like some amount of payoff of him starting a relationship with one of the girls. And it just like glosses over it in like one sentence of like, I didn't need a love potion to help me out with that date. And then it just like moves on. And I'm like, oh, come on. You spent the whole book being this worked up and then you're not even going to say, oh yeah, we made out. Like nothing. So I liked it. I thought it was interesting. I thought it was enjoyable. I liked the world. I'm pretty sure it's part of a series and I might potentially try reading more of the series because, like I said, I just haven't read anything that was written with this tone, and like I'd be interested to see where the author's able to continue the universe. But yeah, if you're looking for a change of pace to expand your horizons when it comes to literary genre, Stormfront by Jim Butcher might be a good place to start.
Okay. I've never heard the concept of a wizard for hire. That was interesting.
Yeah, I thought that it was fun. I feel like it is a interesting and potentially more realistic depiction of what it would be like if magic was real in the world. And some people can do it and some people can't do it. Like you would have some people that are just like selling their services. They're like, hey, I can do magic, hire me. And I thought it was cool. But going from magicians and wizards to authors and sociopaths, let's get into the point of us being here and talk a little bit about the context behind American Psycho. So I'm gonna do some amount of biography work for Bret Easton Ellis to kind of talk a little bit about him. And then I'm going to talk a lot about the reception of the book and compare that with the way that he talks about his development of the book to kind of like juxtapose the way it was received versus the way that he wanted it to be received. And then talk some about the like time period in which it's set and the time period in which he was writing it to kind of give an idea of like, what is he critiquing? Because obviously this is a satire. Bret Easton Ellis has been very public about himself being a satirist. And if you're writing satire, you're critiquing something. So what's going on that he feels is worth critiquing? So, start at the beginning. Bret Easton Ellis was born in LA March 7th, 1964. Sydney, what sign does that make him, and why is that relevant in any way?
March when?
7th?
Is he? I think he's a Pisces. Let me make sure on that. Yeah, that's Pisces. They're innovative and they're what's the empathic? Innovative, empathic.
So don't worry, folks. When he wrote about the brutal murders, he felt that.
He felt bad for those women.
During the initial release for American Psycho, he talked about how the main character, Pat Bateman, was based off of the fact that when he was young, his father was abusive. However, he later on walked that back. I wanted to include it because it's like important to his early life and the way that he has portrayed his early life through interviews. But it's not actually true. Like I said, later on, I think it was in like 2010 or 2011, on his podcast, which he's got a podcast. Go give it a shot. The Bret Easton Ellis podcast. He instead revealed that the character's not based on his dad. He was basing it on himself. And we'll kind of get into this, but Bret has a tendency with all of his books for them to be a little bit autobiographical. Like, his first book was when he was in college and he was writing about college students. His next book was about young adults and he was a young adult. The American Psycho, his third book, is about being a slightly older adult, and he was a slightly older adult. So yeah, he confessed that it was more based on himself, and said that it was coming from a specific place of pain that he was going through in his life during the time of writing it. And actually said that his family life growing up was somewhat difficult because his parents went through a somewhat messy divorce, but his childhood was, quote, idyllic in California. After that, like after growing up in California, he went on to college to study music before he turned to writing, and was actually, while in college, in a band called Line 1 with John Shanks, who is currently the rhythm guitarist for Bon Jovi.
Oh. He could have been in Bon Jovi. That's crazy. Could have been living on a prayer.
That would be so funny for him to have gotten into Bon Jovi after writing this book. Like, I'm just imagining if instead of writing about Genesis, he had written about Bon Jovi and then ended up going on to be in Bon Jovi.
Yeah.
But that's not the only famous person he's got connections to. He actually, in college, met, and I believe is still friendly with Donna Tartt.
Oh, whoa, she keeps coming up.
Satire Fire regular Donna Tartt, who I don't think we'll ever actually cover because I don't think that she's written anything satirical, but she still, we can't get rid of her.
Wait, sorry, I want to backtrack because I was just thinking, so he lied about his father being abusive. Did he ever say, like, why he lied about that? It's
mostly as a result of him not wanting to face the reality of the situation. Okay. Where he understood that the person that he was writing in Pat Bateman was a bad person. And he didn't necessarily want to come to terms with the fact that he was writing about himself and he is a bad person. Oh, okay. And so he kind of like pushed that off. It's kind of like Stephen King really hates the Kubrick interpretation of The Shining. And most of that is to do with the fact that Kubrick really leaned heavily into the main father figure being abusive and alcoholic. And that's kind of what happens in the story, is that this is a story about a man driving his family apart because he can't get his use issues under control, which is probably more accurate to the way that King was envisioning the story when he wrote it. But King doesn't like it because it's a more like damning portrayal of who he was at the time that inspired him to write the story. So I think that it's something similar to that.
Okay.
When he being Bret Easton Ellis, we're back to that, not Stephen King. When he was 21, he published his first novel, which was Less Than Zero. This was in 1985, and it was published by Simon & Schuster. He got like a publishing deal with them, and so his first two novels were both released by Simon & Schuster. This one is a bit controversial in the same way as American Psycho, but it's significantly less controversial, significantly less graphic, brutal, stuff like that. But for his whole career, he's kind of had the same deadpan tone and written very similarly when it comes to themes. He had a second novel. I'm not going to talk about it. It's his least popular, probably, so much so that he thought that he had just fallen off and was really depressed because it didn't do as well as his first novel. When eventually in 1991, he writes American Psycho. We're going to talk more about this later, but it was widely condemned in the literary community and by the public as being overly violent and misogynistic. There were actually enough complaints about it that he and this book got dropped by Simon & Schuster. They decided not to publish it, and it had to go to a different literary agency in order to get published. But like I said, we'll talk about that in the controversy section coming up. He has remained for a while, when he was in the limelight, he remained very vague about his sexuality, which I found really interesting. And the reason that he gave for that was, quote, "If people knew that I was straight, they'd read my books in a different way. If they knew I was gay, Psycho would be read as a different book." Which I think is totally accurate. If you're reading American Psycho from the lens of a straight guy writing it, it's a different book than if a gay guy wrote it. The same with, like, Fight Club, I think.
Yeah.
Once you know that Chuck Palahniuk is gay, Fight Club is a very different book than when you read it thinking Chuck Palahniuk is straight.
Huh. Interesting. But he didn't want people to think he was gay?
Well, he didn't want people to know what his sexuality was.
Yeah. I feel like that would make people maybe more receptive to the violence or because they know that it's not motivated by like that Pat Bateman isn't actually, or that Bret Easton Ellis isn't actually like thinking about women in this way. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I think that it could just be like that wasn't necessarily like. The mid-90s wasn't a great time to be a gay person.
This is true.
Not that now is a better time to be a gay person who's out, but yeah, the 90s wasn't the best of times to be out and gay. Which tracks because he ended up writing a novel in 2005, which he dedicated to someone, and he later came out to say that man who had since died, was his partner and his lover. And he officially came out as gay in 2011, even though he'd hinted before that he was probably gay. Like in an interview, he had talked about being bisexual, and then he was like, I don't know how long bisexual is going to cover me because it's been 5 or 7 years since I've had sex with a woman. So, like, he was kind of openly but not explicitly a gay man before that, but 2011 was when he officially came out. Then I wanted to talk more about the development and the reception, as well as the conception of American Psycho. He has this really interesting quote that he gave where he's talking about why he wrote this book that I'm going to send to you, Sid.
Bateman was crazy the same way I was. He did not come out of me sitting down and wanting to write a grand sweeping indictment of yuppie culture. It initiated because of my own isolation and alienation at a point in my life. I was living like Patrick Bateman. I was slipping into a consumerist kind of void that was supposed to give me confidence and make me feel good about myself, but just made me feel worse and worse and worse about myself. That is where the tension of American Psycho came from. It wasn't that I was going to make up this serial killer on Wall Street. High concept. Fantastic. It came from a much more personal place, and that's something that I've only been admitting in the last year or so. I was so on the defensive because of the reaction to the book that I wasn't able to talk about it on that level.
Yeah. So, like, kind of going back to what I was talking about and what you had asked about earlier, if everybody is hating on your book because of how violent and misogynistic it is, and then you say, oh, by the way, it's based on me,
Yeah.
you're going to catch some heat for that.
Yeah, definitely.
Like I said, Simon & Schuster was supposed to publish this, but before they did, some female employees at the publishing house started to argue that it should never be released, and they advocated for a public strike of the book. And then I don't know for a fact that it was one of these employees that leaked it, but somebody leaked the book before it was published to a couple of news outlets, who then started a really big press storm about some of the very violent scenes in this book. It resulted in Simon & Schuster backing out, but then 48 hours later, it got picked up again by a subdivision of Random House, which I think is really fun and interesting, because I did find out that Simon & Schuster, after backing out, did not make him pay back the advance that they gave him for publishing the book. And so he actually got paid twice for this book because people wanted it boycotted.
Yeah.
One of the biggest, like, groups that was advocating for the boycotting of the book was the National Organization for Women, or NOW, which advocated for boycotting the book. It went so far that there was actually one chapter president in California that made a hotline that you could call, and it was just a 15-minute recording of her reading a really graphic scene from the book as a, like, this is what you're supporting if you buy this book. That same chapter president stated, quote, Mr. Ellis is a confused, sick young man with a deep hatred of women who will do anything for a fast buck. So they hated his ass. But there were a lot of places that took the backlash, like, there basically became a backlash to the book, where, like, the LA Times published an opinion piece where somebody wrote in and said, instead of the National Organization for Women, now should stand for the Notorious Organization of Whiners, as it's making a big deal out of a trashy, insignificant book. I love the inherent, like, misogyny within that of calling a group of women whiners.
Whiners.
I also like that he double dips. He hates both the National Organization for Women and also American Psycho.
Yeah.
But regardless of all this pressure, it still got made, still got published. After getting published, there were certain bookstores and book providers that opted to not stock it for violence or whatever other reason. One person actually said this that I'm going to send to you. This is from a bookstore owner in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
My job is to provide my customers with the best cross-section of literature I can find. And Mr. Ellis is a terrible writer. Always has been. As a bookseller, good writing is my agenda, not violence against women.
So, I mean, you know, you are absolutely allowed to sell or not sell whatever it is that you would like to as a bookseller. That is well within your right. But I thought that it was really interesting because this is starting to get into not just was the public opposed to this book because of the violence, but there was a lot of people who just thought that it was a bad book. One of them was Roger Strauss Jr., who was the president and chief executive for Farrar, Straus and Giroux. He's a very well-known person in the publishing industry, or at least was at that time. And he said that American Psycho is, quote, the most revolting book I have ever read. To say that it has any redeeming social value or that mainstream film and television contain equally offensive material is bullshit. The horrors perpetuated on women in that book go far beyond anything that has either been written or depicted. I'm sorry. I just don't see the thing as being defendable. It actually had Ellis get a lot of hate mail and even death threats as a result of it being published. However, he did get exactly one good review, and that was in the Los Angeles Times. And he referred to the review in the Los Angeles Times as, quote, "the one good review in the national press," he said, "resulted in, quote, a 3-page letter section of all the people canceling their subscriptions."
Ah.
Yeah. So he got one good review, and that one good review made people cancel subscriptions to the magazine.
Oh, no. I would not send a death threat to the author of this book because, like, he might not be a murderer, but he definitely can write a very detailed murder.
I like that you specified of this book. So there are some books that you would send a death threat to the author.
No, I wouldn't send any death threats. But I'm just like, it's kind of crazy. Like, you read this book, or you read, like, one of the gruesome scenes in it, and you're like, yeah, I'm going to send this guy a death threat. It's like, I don't know. I don't know if he's the guy to mess with.
The book, obviously, today is kind of seen in a different light than it was when it initially came out, where I think publicly a lot of people maybe feel the same way about the violence in the book and the way that it is directed towards women, but it's been reconsidered in, like, the literary sphere, with a lot of critics saying now, actually, it's a pretty good book. And a lot of that reconsideration happened because of the movie.
Yeah.
The movie came out, and a lot of people were surprised that the message of the movie was so feminist focused, and that it had a woman write it, direct it. It was produced by women, and all of those
like
people were at least like,
book.
yeah. All of them were at least partially fans of the book to some extent or another. And that kind of endorsement from these people and the watching of the movie and seeing those themes in a different depiction had people going back to the book, rereading it and saying, wait a second, I think we missed the point. The writer for the movie and she also acted in it, had this to say about the book and the way in which the movie caused that reconsideration of the quality of the book.
Bret really thought he was writing a feminist book. I remember seeing him speak and really talk about that and how he was actually hurt and shocked that feminists spoke out against his book because he thought he was writing a feminist book, and that's what we saw in it. It's just that he went all crazy with it, so it's hard to get past the gruesomeness. Another conversation we had all the time is, at what point does it go from satire to exploitation, and not the good kind of exploitation that everybody thinks is so cool, but people getting off on how violent it is.
I thought that this was interesting because, like, I also kind of, like, I interpret this book to be rather feminist, but I do also see the point of, like, I feel like that line between satire and exploitation is very personal. And so I could definitely understand if you read this book only seeing it as exploitation and not really going much further than that with it, or not wanting to give it much more credit than that. But, like, how do you feel? Like, where do you feel like this book falls on that spectrum?
I'll talk about this more when we're getting into, like, our just overall reviews of the book.
Mm-hmm.
But I think maybe for me, like, I think it's definitely more satirical than exploitative, but sometimes I just think that the intensity and the gruesomeness of the violence, while I see the point, and, like, I totally got the point of this book, and I liked it conceptually, it just made it really hard to read, and not, I sometimes thought, like, the graphicness just felt unnecessary. I think it was just, and that's where it starts to toe the line of me being like, well, we didn't need that scene for me to receive this point. Like, you know, it didn't. So I think I see both sides, but I would lean more towards it being satirical and being like, yeah, I respect it.
Yeah, I understand that. I think that I lean more towards the satire interpretation than, like, I think that it's further from exploitation for me than it is for you, from what I'm hearing. But yeah, I totally understand the exploitative interpretation of this and could easily see how that would be the interpretation that someone makes. Because it's like the interpretation that a lot of people are still making. Well, I'm going to talk about it here in a second, talking about like both past context culturally and current context culturally. There's still a lot of people who read this in an exploitative way and do so with pleasure. Like, I think back then the broad strokes were people reading exploitation into the novel and saying no one should read this is a bad book because it's exploitative of the suffering of women. And then you've kind of got a group of people today that are like, wow, this book is so violent to women, isn't that awesome?
Or just like aspiring to be Patrick Bateman in derogatory ways. Well, I mean, honestly, there's not like a complimentary way to be Patrick Bateman, but I just think, listeners, if you go on a date with someone and they're like, I love Pat Bateman, I want to be like him, don't go on another date with them. No,
that's that should be a warning sign for you.
Like, that was another thing I saw in Book Talk, like people commenting on like, oh, my situationship loved Patrick Bateman. I'm like, that's a red flag. Like, immediately stop. Like, maybe it doesn't mean that they're gonna murder you, but it might mean that they don't have boundaries when it comes
and if
to
nothing else, it means
women.
that they don't know how to interpret literature.
Yeah, and that, biggest red flag of all, bigger than murder. No, I'm just kidding.
Murder I can excuse. Misinterpreting literature,
no,
never gonna happen. So this is something that this is something that Ellis talked about in an earlier quote, and so this is kind of what I want to spend the rest of the time here talking about, is the idea of yuppie culture. So, Sydney, do you know what a yuppie is and what yuppie stands for?
What it stands for? No, I do know what a yuppie is.
Okay, what is your interpretation of a yuppie?
Like, just someone from, I mean, I take it to mean like from New York, but like a young person like on Wall Street, like just someone who like almost like Nepo baby, just like has a lot of money and like is living in New York, and yeah.
So you're really, like, basically you're getting it. Yuppie is generally, like, it started in 1980. That's like the first recorded use of it written down, although the person who wrote it says that he heard it from other people, so it was like in the lexicon before that. But it stands for either young urban professional or young upwardly mobile professional. So the idea is these young youthful people who are moving into cities, they have high paying jobs, and they are constantly driven to get an even higher paying job in order to improve their status in life. It started as just like a descriptor word, but then it became a lot more of a pejorative in like the mid 80s, kind of in response to gentrification, because these kinds of people were the demographics that were taking over neighborhoods that were historically lower income and then modifying them in all of the nefarious ways that we are much more well versed in today when it comes to gentrification.
So, no, we're probably gonna get to like modern. I was gonna say is it like finance bros like today? Like
Kind of.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about how it's changed over time. But the like last bit of information around the like yuppie era that's important to know is that in 1984, so like just a little bit before there was a real pushback against the concept, Senator Gary Hart ran a presidential campaign in which he was labeled as the quote-unquote yuppie candidate. And this is what solidified the image of a yuppie being someone who is, in addition to all the other stuff we've already mentioned, socially liberal but fiscally conservative. Which I think that we've all heard somebody refer to themselves as that, particularly if you happen to go to college and talk to anyone who is getting a degree in business. The term has changed over time, but it's kind of always like the concept of this type of guy has been around for a long time. So like briefly in the 2000s, after yuppie had faded out, it became bobos. Do you want to take a guess as to what a bobo is?
Business or banking. No. I don't know.
That's pretty good. Like, it's not anywhere close to being right, but it's a pretty good, it's better than I would have done if put on the spot. Bobos stands for bourgeois bohemians, which was a lot more focused on the aesthetic markers rather than the economic markers of this group of people, saying that they are rich people, but they're adopting the style of hippies, basically, was what that was talking about. After that, recently, it became the concept that was really popularized of PMCs, or the professional managerial class, where the focus was put back really hard on economics, talking about how these people are like a new type of class that Karl Marx had never envisioned, which isn't accurate, but whatever. All of them kind of fell out of fashion because they don't actually have any empirical evidence to back up their existence a lot of the times. It's more of people making up a kind of guy that they hate and then trying to take that made-up guy in their head and ascribe properties to him that they really don't like.
Is this like, did you ever hear that song that was made out of that girl that was like, I'm looking for a man in finance, trust fund, 6'5", blue eyes?
No, I haven't heard that, but that you've nailed it. That's a yuppie.
That's a yuppie.
Like you said, this is like, I think the modern interpretation of this is kind of like the finance bro. And I think that it's really interesting that I feel as though in modern times it has shifted into being a more concrete archetype of a kind of guy than it was at one point. Like, over time, it's steadily become more and more of a lived reality because I think the labels have been around for long enough that people are self-describing themselves in that manner. And so when instead of making an archetype fit a person is making themselves into an archetype, it becomes a lot more applicable to who they are as a person. The kind of like social stuff that was happening in this time that really made yuppieism pop off is pretty complicated to explain. Basically, there's always, I'm just going to use the term yuppie, even though I'm still just talking about this kind of guy, that you could also use bobo, you could use PMC, whatever you want to use. Yuppies have like always existed. The jobs that they have just kind of shifted over time. And the shift that was kind of happening in the 80s and the 90s that resulted in the kind of yuppieism and the backlash to yuppieism that we are seeing a lot in this book was a lot to do with the changing of the economy at that time, where used to, a long time ago, the bulk of American jobs was agriculture. That totally started tanking, and then a lot of jobs started becoming manufacturing jobs. But in like the 60s and 70s, all of those jobs just kind of started getting offshored. And so a larger percentage of the population was getting into these jobs where middle managers were a thing and stuff like that. And that kind of resulted in this brand new upbringing of a yuppie class with disposable income that were seen to be at odds with the common people. Like, they're not necessarily capitalists, but they have enough of a stake in the company that they care about how the company does, and they're making more than you do. So we hate them.
I feel like the context is interesting because now I'm thinking of like specific scenes in the book where, yeah, Pat like really fits that description, especially when he's interacting with middle or lower class individuals, or just people who, like, I'm thinking about the Upper West Side, and it's a very, still to this day, Jewish neighborhood. And he lives on the Upper West Side, and he's like angry that people are Jewish, and it's like, well, yeah, you you chose to live here, like, because that one scene where he's like yelling about kosher, because he doesn't know what kosher is, and I don't know, and he's like, give me a milkshake.
Yeah, it was a good scene. I like that. But yeah, it does help to put into perspective a lot of the book. And then the last thing that I wanted to talk about was just some of the modern ways in which this trope is realized, and modern ways in which this book is being interpreted. I think that a lot of the movement that we have seen of young men in particular moving towards an idealization of Pat Bateman and this like finance yuppie bro archetype is a result of a lot of young men feeling really powerless right now, as a lot of people do in this time, in this world, and then misattributing why they lack power. Fundamentally, this book and Pat Bateman are obsessed with status symbols. Pat Bateman has a really hollow life, and as a result of that, he has to feel as though he can give himself status in the world through the use of symbols. That's why he dresses nicely. That's why he works out. That's why he goes to these specific clubs and specific bars and gets all these reservations at places, is so he can place himself on a hierarchy of everyone that is around him. But when you're living in a world where you can't necessarily give yourself status, the symbols are the only thing that is important. That's why you become obsessed with the aesthetics of things. And so I think that this book is kind of seen as like a playbook almost of how you can give the image of being rich when like you don't actually have the means of being rich.
Like how you can, you're on the grind, and you have your routine, your workout routine, and your morning routine, and you wear specific clothes, and you do skincare, and you and you have like a rigorous life, maybe, and that keeps you feeling like you're doing something to contribute to your status, even if you can't.
It's a dedication to the idea that you should be able, through hard work, to be successful. And you kind of are living in a world where that isn't true. The people who work hard aren't necessarily wealthy, and the people who are wealthy don't necessarily work hard. But if you like really invest yourself in that idea, and you invest yourself in that image of success, that's what leads people down these specific roads where they're talking about how much they love Pat Bateman and Andrew Tate because they see those avenues as a way of projecting a status by either acquiring new symbols or they see a way of advancing themselves by degrading others. And as a result, you end up with hating women and loving money and suits.
Loving money and suits. Yeah, that's such an interesting concept. I didn't even realize that was a thing until like we started reading this book, and I was reading articles and different things about it and reviews, and I was like, huh? like I just don't, it's hard to conceptualize like why, I guess like why you would want to idolize a serial killer. I mean, like,
yeah.
but I mean, some people idolize other serial killers as well, like real ones. So
yeah. Well, I mean, which is worse, idolizing a real serial killer or one in a book? Listener, you tell me, because I don't I don't know if I have an answer.
Well, you heard it here. You don't want to be like Pat Bateman. There's other ways to find fulfillment in life.
Get off of Grindset TikTok. It is making you a worse person.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the context that I wanted to share with this to kind of get into next week's episode where we're talking about the analysis, because I think particularly knowing how Bret himself envisioned this book as being interpreted is good to know. Like, knowing that he wrote it thinking of it as a critique of both himself and also of like the anti-feminist movements that were happening at the time. I think that helps cast it in an appropriate light where you're kind of able to understand why he's using certain elements, why he's going about things in a specific way, stuff like that. But before we get into next week's episode, we've got to finish out this week's episode by playing one of our favorite games, Have They Read It? A game where we name famous people and then speculate wildly as to whether or not we believe that they have read this book. So, while doing some research, I actually found a quote from Bono about this book, about how he knew that he was in it, but he chose not to read it because he didn't think that we needed to be glorifying the lifestyle that this book was glorifying. And then he saw the movie and he loved it. So I don't know if he's read the book since then, but I know that up until the movie he hadn't read it. But I was thinking, okay, I don't have quotes from some of the other people featured in this book. So, Sydney, do you think action movie star Tom Cruise has read American Psycho?
I was thinking about that. I saw this, I have no idea if this was real, like if this was true at all, but I think I saw like a TikTok that was saying that Christian Bale based like his character as Pat Bateman off like specifically his like stare off of like Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
Do you
yeah.
That's such an insult. I think that no, I think he's seen the movie, but I don't think he's read the book.
I'm certain that he's seen the movie, but yeah, I don't know if he would have read it or not. I know that he watches like at least 2 movies a day, so I don't know if he has time to read literally anything.
Yeah, no. That's funny. Well, do you think that... I was going to say, like, do you think John Bon Jovi, maybe, has read this book?
No. I don't think so. I don't picture... I feel like Bon Jovi probably reads exclusively westerns and memoirs. I don't know why that's the picture that I have of him, but I just feel like maybe John Bon Jovi just has a singular memoir about Bruce Springsteen, and he reads that 3 times a year, and that's it. So, another person who was originally tied to the movie when it was in production, before Christian Bale was officially cast as Pat Bateman, there was talks of Ewan McGregor playing Pat Bateman, the star of Trainspotting and Star Wars and other great movies. So do you think that his co-star in the Star Wars movies, Natalie Portman, has read American Psycho?
I don't really know much about like reading habits of Natalie Portman, if she has any.
Yeah, she seems vague, like she seems smart to me.
Yeah, I feel like she reads. I'm just not sure. Maybe. I see her as someone who's like, I want to read the book before I watch the movie. And so I figure if she's watched the movie, which a lot of people have, then maybe she read the book first.
Yeah, I don't know if I see her enjoying the book, but I do think that I feel like she's read it.
Okay. My last one. I don't want to take the obvious, but Donald Trump's mentioned a lot in this book, but I don't want to give him more airtime. But
yeah, but
another
real quick,
mention,
no.
Another mention, I think multiple times, is Ivanka Trump.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think she's read this?
No.
No.
Also, no. I think that her likelihood of having read it is higher than Donald Trump's.
Huh.
But I just don't think so.
She's a businesswoman.
Sure.
Kind of.
And business is good. So that is going to do it for us for this week. Thank you so much for listening to us talk about the context behind this infamous book. And we hope that you join us next week when we're going to be talking about the analysis and the reviewing and ranking of this book and all of that. But in the meantime, we would appreciate it if you would like this episode, comment, subscribe, rate it 5 stars, tell your friends about this incredible podcast that is now your new favorite. Our intro and outro are remixes of the song 48 by Cullah. And Sydney, if people would like to contact us between episodes, where can they find us?
Yeah, we are on Instagram at the Satire Fire Pod, Pod, and we are on TikTok, as I've mentioned in this episode, Blue Sky, and YouTube at the Satire Fire. And yeah, follow us, like, comment, share, whatever you want to do. Engage with our content. I'm hoping to have some fun Pat Bateman inspired videos coming up, so go follow us and see all of that on any of those platforms.
Yeah, go follow us and engage with the content, because if we don't get enough engagement, we are going to make a hard turn into Grindset TikTok. So, be warned.
This is a threat.
But Thanks for listening, and as always, don't forget to support your local library. I am Samuel.
I'm Sydney.
And we'll see you next week. Bye.
I just about come to the end of the road. Here, I've just about lost patience with you people. You get your ass out into the mountains or someplace or hide in there and watch that damn tube. But if not, fuck it. I'm done. In fact, my sermon